The stories you are about to hear are true. Some names and locations have been changed at the author's discretion. Welcome to Uncle Josh's True Scary Stories. The Creeps on the Prairie. This happened one day back when I was 17. I'm now 24. I was living on my family's ranch near MacLeod, North Dakota. My job, when I wasn't tending to the various chores and trivial tasks on my family's ranch, was I was to transport the grain of farmers from around the area during harvest season. It was good pay, considering all I did was drive around from point A to point B. And also, what 17-year-old boy doesn't want to drive a huge fucking tractor across the beautiful prairies of North Dakota? Well, that's what I thought until the fateful day of October 18th, 2008. Yeah, I remember the date exactly. It was around 8 p.m. and I was doing my last load. It was dark, really dark. All I could see was the gravel road in front of me with my headlights. I was about 10 miles from point A, heading for another 7 miles until point B, when I saw about 5 silhouettes of human figures appear on the road, blocking any way of passing. When my headlights finally made out that it wasn't just a hallucination, I immediately stopped the tractor. I don't want to fathom the idea of killing someone, despite how menacing they appear to be. They just stood there stoically. They were all wearing red cloaks and gave me an emotionless expression, as if they were mindless robots waiting for a command. Since they were blocking the road and to the sides of the road were ditches that I couldn't maneuver around, I was stuck. For a good minute or two, nothing happened, albeit, I gotta admit, it felt like an hour. Suddenly, all of them said at once in a unifying tone, "Get out." Even though it was said subtly, the dead silence of the night and my horrendous fear of the situation, I made those words out clearly. I was now batshit panicking. I didn't know whether they meant leave the place or get out of the tractor or what. I was hoping they meant get out of the place. The middle person then lifted up his cloak and revealed an axe. I knew now that they wanted me the hell out of there. But instead, the people all ran off into the fields to the sides, except the person holding the axe. However, in a few minutes, he just signaled toward the road in front of me, and I heard him once again say, "Get out." He then proceeded to run off into the fields, and I practically floored the tractor to point B. I notified the MacLeod sheriff a few days later, and he told me he would investigate. To this day, I am dumbfounded as to why they stopped me on the road only to tell me to leave. Were they just lowlifes looking to prank somebody? Were they some fucked up cult, or did they think I was someone else who they were looking for? I don't know. I still continue to haul the grain, but I assure you I don't do it at night. A reoccurring nightmare. During my time in the Marines, I never had any odd or terrifying experiences, until my last deployment. During this deployment, I was sent to the Middle East and kind of tossed aside by my command because they already had one sergeant in control of the section I was supposed to be in charge of. I was then sent to the security forces for the base I was on. While on Sec 4, as we in the business call it, I was assigned to be the non-commissioned officer in charge, and that would be for a post on the night shift. While on this post, I was in charge of 4 other guys, 2 of them who were originally from the section I was recently whored out from. Every night we spent watching as cars drove in and out of our gate. Fast forward a few months of standing this post every night, me and my unit returned to the United States to our home base, and that's when everything started. Originally, I thought it was just me. About once or twice a week I had the same nightmare over and over, where I was strangled by a faceless shadow who was very tall and had long arms. The dream originally started as just another nightmare, possibly due to a side effect of vaccinations, change in time zones, flight exhaustion, booze, whatever, I don't know. But this went on for about 2 weeks. When I went home on leave to my home in another state, the nightmare seemed to stop for a week or 2. Until my last night at home. I was going to sleep as usual in my family's spare bedroom. I've been moved out of there for several years already, and my trusty dog was sleeping beside me to keep me company. That's when the nightmare got worse. This time it was very vivid and surreal, where I didn't wake up at the first sign of being startled. During those dreams, everything started very boring and normal-like. In the one I remember the most, I was going about my daily routine on deployment. I was off shift and walking to the chow hall when I stopped to have a smoke with my guys, where I could hear them say, "Hey, Sergeant, did you hear about something?" I don't remember exactly what he had said in the dream. And I would sit there and continue to make conversations for a few minutes as I took drags off my Marlboro Red, occasionally cracking jokes and then giving my younger Marines life advice. When walking into the front door of the chow hall, I would clear out my rifle. We had one on us at all times. Well, when opening the doors, everything went black. Like the doors opened to black as I stepped inside to look around. I would then stop and turn to head back out the doors when everything behind me disappears as well. I'm alone, still in my gear from standing post, when all of a sudden, I see out of the corner of my eye an even darker shadow moving towards me, and when I looked straight at it, I was paralyzed. The shadowy figure stood around 8 feet tall and had long arms. It was close to me, so close that it wrapped its hands around my neck and I could feel myself gasping for air, slowly losing consciousness. After what felt like eons of screaming, I woke up back in my bed at home screaming, and my dog freaking out because I was screaming. I woke the entire house up that night. About a week after that, I'd already driven back to my home base, and it was time to go back to work. A while back, I was still losing sleep. Those dreams were reaching me about 3 times a week at this point. A weekend was about to start, and I was assigned to barracks duty. Barracks duty is a mindless job. You tour the barracks, stop a drunk guy here or there, tell people to turn down their music, occasionally have to talk to someone important who was checking up on his Marines, so, yeah, I forgot to mention, that post is 24 hours long. One night about 3 a.m., I was touring the smoke pit of the barracks when I ran into my 2 guys who stood post with me overseas. I walked up, lit up a smoke, and decided to talk to them for a few minutes before I returned back to my duty hut. I asked them what they were doing up so late, although it wasn't uncommon to see a Marine up and in the smoke pit at 3 a.m. I just wanted to make friendly conversation. My 2 guys started talking about nightmares and not sleeping. I was prying into it for a few minutes out of curiosity when one of them pulled out his sketchbook for tattoo ideas. He then said, "This is what I see in my nightmares." Both me and my other buddy went silent and suddenly got very cold. The creature in his sketchbook was the same thing for both of our dreams. We then went into detail and saw that all of our nightmares were the same thing. Doing normal things, everything fades to black, shadowy figure strangles us, down to the figure itself, the same. None of us were able to sleep that night. Even though it was my job to stay awake all night for my duty, I didn't want to go to sleep at all after I got done working. That was over a year ago. I have since left the Marines. I just decided not to re-enlist. I wanted to go to college. Those nightmares have seemed to have gone away, but every few months I do have a nightmare similar to the ones I had, but they're just not as intense. I'm not in touch with those guys anymore, but I do wonder if they're still having them too, and if these nightmares mean something. I truly hope they don't. A strange upbringing. My family moved into a house when I was about 3 years old. My brother was 6 at the time, and my parents were just looking to get a bigger place than what we had. It wasn't far away from where we were living at the time, and in fact, it was a close friend of the family who was selling the place. After a couple of beers, my father actually bought the place on a handshake deal, and they got the bank stuff done later. We moved out when I was 13, and my parents never came out and said anything about what happened in those 10 years. However, when I was about 20 years old, my mother finally told us that the woman who owned the home before my parents bought it had hung herself in a bedroom on the 2nd floor. Growing up, the story was that she died in her sleep. I guess my parents didn't want me and my brother being scared by any stories, just the crazy shit that happened there. The neighborhood is a great one. It's off the main strip in a quiet suburb of Buffalo, New York, and has no through traffic. The block, as it was shaped like a P, and on the opposite end of the main drag runs a creek. Quiet, peaceful. I'd pick up a house there in a second, but probably not the one I grew up in. It was a 3-bedroom house with a half-finished basement. All of the bedrooms were on the 2nd floor with a large living room and dining room on the 1st. Not a huge place, but not too small either. I shared a room with my brother for about 7 years, and we had plenty of fun getting into trouble and all that, but we also didn't push the envelope with my parents. We had an interest in the paranormal, and mine probably a little more than just an interest, and many things we saw or heard were blamed on the fact that I happened to be reading something about ghosts. My first recollection is about the time I was 6 or so. We would often wake up in the middle of the night to hear footsteps coming from the basement. At first my father told us it was just the furnace, and we bought that logical answer. Until the next night, and the night after that, and the night after that. I can still remember hearing that boom of the furnace kicking in. That I did recognize as a logical answer. But then there was the soft padding of footsteps coming up the basement stairs, and then on the set from the first floor to the second. It was always soft, but loud enough to know that they weren't sounds from the furnace. They would come down the hallway, which was a straight shot from the stairs ending in a cluster of 3 bedrooms. Then they would stop at our bedroom door. When I was 10, I moved into the room across the hall, and the sounds stopped. One night, a friend of mine, let's call him Jay, was going to stay overnight, and we were going to sleep on the front porch. Why? We were dorks. This was the early 80s, man. Give me a break. My brother and Jay's older brother were going to camp out in the backyard in my brother's pup tent. At around 3:30, my moms came out and dragged us into the living room. We were sleeping through a thunderstorm and didn't even realize we were getting soaked. Still groggy from sleeping, we plopped onto the floor and dozed off again. At 4:15, and I'll never forget the time as long as I live, I felt something was wrong. I was facing our fireplace that sat at the one end of the living room, and I could see a white figure reflected in the glass. It was behind us at the far end of the room. I noticed that it seemed to be falling and trying to catch its balance or something, hold on to the TV, a chair, the large sofa that we had. I punched Jay to wake him up, but it was nothing doing. He didn't wake up. I closed my eyes and fell back asleep. Later that morning, after my dad went to work at about 5:30, Jay woke up and said he heard muffled musical notes, not too loud, but enough to get his attention. When he woke me up to hear it, the sounds had stopped. I immediately thought it was my brother screwing around, but we soon found out that he and Jay's brother had slept in the basement after the tent they were in was being pelted with rocks at about 2:30 in the morning, right before the storm hit. My brother had a trumpet, and Jay said the musical notes sounded like a horn, so we bolted upstairs to check things out. In my brother's room, the trumpet had been in its case and stashed in the closet the day before, but was now standing upright in the middle of the floor. The case was opened, and standing on its end in the closet. We didn't tell anybody about what we had heard and saw. About a year and a half later, Jay was spending the night once again, but this time we were sleeping in my bedroom. Our heads were together near the door of the room, with Jay lying parallel to the bunk bed setup that split the room down the middle. I was at the foot of the beds. Sometime in the night, Jay woke up and saw a dark figure standing over him. He could only make out part of the head, but said it seemed like it was kind of lolling to one side and that it had really messy hair. He closed his eyes and went back to sleep, thinking it was a dream. When he woke up in the light of the morning, he yelled to me. He was still in his sleeping bag, but on the other side of the bed. The bottom bunk was only maybe 6 inches off the floor, so there was no way he could have slid underneath it to end up on the other side by his own volition. And let me take a moment and explain to you that Jay and his family are one of the most religious families I know. They still are. They were the family that got my family back to attending church, and we're still friends to this day. Jay was a little more than freaked out, to say the very least, after that. As time wore on, I found that some of my friends really didn't like my house. It gave them the creeps. They were fine during the day, but at night, nobody really wanted to hang around. My brother and I never felt threatened, and my parents certainly never said anything happened to them. Not long after that, one of my schoolmates came over on Easter break. I'll call him S. My parents and brother went to visit my grandmother in a nearby town, and the two of us went down to the creek to goof off and grab a smoke. It started to get nasty out. Rain, sleet, kind of ruined the idea of hanging around outside. We came back to my house and were just bullshitting about girls and stuff. We actually had my tape recorder rolling while we were talking. At one point, S said, "Hey, I think your parents are home." I hadn't heard anything and disagreed. We kept talking, and again he interrupted with, "Seriously, your mom's calling you." I went to the stairs and called down to see if anybody was there. No answer. S was starting to get weirded out, but I told him not to worry about it. He was probably just hearing something from outside. Then I heard the voice. All of this was on tape, mind you. I started explaining the situation on the tape, and during my speaking, the voice called me again. This time, it was clearly on the tape. We played it back, and sure enough, right before I yelled out, "Holy shit!" you could hear a high-pitched female voice calling my name. We ran around the house and looked for anything that might show some trickery was going on, but there was nothing. My family got home about an hour or so later, and we played the tape for my brother. He listened with open ears and wide eyes. I actually took the tape to school and played it for my class, and everybody was pretty spooked, especially my friends. Sadly, and this is something I cannot explain, the tape just disappeared one day. I honestly have no idea what happened to it. Occasional strange sounds came and went, but nothing severe happened until the next year. My best friend to this day, and let's call him K, was staying overnight one winter, and we were about 12 years old. I had a dual cassette deck tape player, man, that was a big deal in 1986, and it kept turning on and off all night long. I unplugged it and pushed it under my bed. I was sleeping on the floor while Kay was sleeping on my bed. With the cord unplugged, that puppy came on 3 times in the night. After the first time, I stopped hitting the stop button once I realized that the radio had been unplugged and there was nothing I could do. In the last year we lived there, a lot of smaller things happened, some with higher frequency. Doing the laundry became a royal pain in the ass because anyone who would start the wash would come down to put the wet stuff in the dryer only to find the lid on the washer open. This wasn't a once-in-a-while occurrence. It happened all the time and to everybody in the house, including my parents. If it were a once-in-a-while kind of thing, I'd be left to believe that whomever was doing the wash was just forgetful and didn't shut the washer lid. But it happened so many times, I've ruled out that possibility. One December, we went to get a Christmas tree with Jay's family. We were gone for a few hours, having a great time, and headed home after getting trees that we had cut down. A few minutes after we pulled into our driveway, a police car rolled up, and the officer started talking to my dad. Apparently, while we were gone, our phone repeatedly called 911 and sent the police to our house. There was no one home, and the place was still locked. The officer clearly saw that no one was there. He wanted to just verify that the family was okay and that no one was in the house in danger. He was a little perplexed, though. It never happened again after that. Stuff would get lost easily, too. Usually they were smaller items like watches and jewelry, but one time my father went down to a shop area to grab his circular saw. We were going to our place at a lake south of Buffalo and had to build a new deck for the camp. The rest of the family was in the car waiting to shove off when he came roaring out of the house mad as hell. The saw wasn't in his shop. And the old man had many moments like the father in Gene Shepherd's A Christmas Story where he would get so mad he couldn't form sentences and ended up just swearing a blue streak. That's what he did. He went back into the house and tore through it, coming up with nothing. Naturally, my brother and I got blamed for doing something to it. And that was a negative. We hadn't touched it. My mom told my dad that he probably let somebody borrow it, or maybe he left it at our place on the lake. He was royally pissed off, but did call a friend to borrow his saw for the weekend, and we left. When we got home, after that weekend, we found a nice surprise. The saw was sitting in the middle of the living room floor. Not long after that, I was just hanging around the house by myself one Saturday night while my parents were out somewhere. My brother was at his friend's house, Dee, who lived a couple of lots away from our place. I remember I was listening to Van Halen 2 at top volume and doing something on the computer, my old Apple IIe. I love that thing. Then I heard something that I thought was on the record. I put the needle back on the song to see if I could hear it again, but it wasn't there. I stopped the record player and then heard the sound of my dad's circular saw running in the basement. I just about shit my pants and called Dee's house to talk to my brother and him, and when they answered, I just started yelling for them to get their ass over here. They both showed up a few minutes later and we went down into the basement. The saw was in its drawer and unplugged. Shortly after that incident, we moved to another house in the same neighborhood, but not much happened there, maybe 1 or 2 things, but nothing like in the other place. It wasn't until later that other things began happening to me in other houses I would live in, but I'll save those for another time. Before I end, I'd like to throw this out there. I do believe it's possible that some sort of telekinetic power may have caused these things to happen, and there may be a scientific reason for all the strange stuff that we experienced. But I really can't say. I just don't know. The almost invisible thing. I don't know where to start. All I know is the subsequent ridicule I have received for telling people this story should be testament to its truth. Why on earth would I make it up if I knew people were just going to rip me apart and make fun of me about it? It was around the year 2003. I started seeing this I can only best describe as a space-time anomaly. Ridicule continues to this day, as I accidentally described it one time as it looking like Predator. Yeah, bad move. I should have said it was when the Predator is invisible. Not that that would help at all. While traveling to work in my car during the winter months, things are a lot darker than normal, and I saw this apparition cross my path almost every morning for weeks. I awaited the coming months with a certain amount of anticipation, as I had been traveling this road every day recently with friends, work colleagues, so I can't wait to say, hey, look, see, I told you so. It usually happened before this little village called Raura, and all I can say is it scared the life out of me. I don't believe in ghosts. Still don't. Never will. This thing is beyond my comprehension, though. At first, I didn't even notice it. It's so subtle. It ran, for lack of a better term, right across the face of my car sometimes, slightly farther ahead of me, sometimes right in front of the bonnet. I thought I could make out a coat the last time I saw it, but I just can't be sure. I remember going into work one morning, and the guy I work with actually said, "Man, you look like you've just seen a ghost." At first, this thing did really make me sick with worry, to the point I just wanted to go the long way around to work, which is extremely impractical. After a couple of weeks, it made me, still scared, but more angry than anything else, up to the point that I actually jokingly suggested to the same guy I talked to at work that I stick an electromagnetic net on the front of my car and see if I could catch whatever this thing is. It disappeared as the mornings got lighter and lighter, but I still remember that feeling of dread I had every morning for those 4 weeks of winter. At first I ignored it and passed it off as my mind playing tricks on me. It was only after the 10th encounter I actually started noticing it. It really is that subtle. One time I had my stepdad in the car as I was driving to work, and it crossed the road only for me to turn around and see my stepdad fast asleep. You have no idea how much this peeved me. Every time I have suggested to people to come take a look, they shy away from the idea. I don't know if they're scared or what, but they just can't be bothered getting up at 6:30 in the morning to have a look. I'm writing this just as the mornings are starting to get darker again, and this time I'll be armed with a video camera. Hopefully, I'll be able to catch this thing on tape. Not sure I will, but I'm going to give it a hell of a try. My childhood neighbor from hell. I grew up in a neighborhood that didn't have many kids. There were only some teenagers across the street who would humor me sometimes and play with me, and there were 2 girls that lived next door. At a glance, their house looked normal enough: a playhouse, a swing set, and an inflatable pool during the summer. The older of the 2 girls, we'll call her Jill, was my age, while her sister was 2 years younger than us. I'll refer to her as Mary. You could tell that when they were playing outside that maybe they weren't the best kids to be hanging around with, but when they're the only options for friends, you kind of have to make do in a neighborhood like that. Jill and I were pretty close, but she would get angry for no apparent reason and end up shouting at me. I'd really never had any other friends, though, so I just assumed it was normal. A few times she would push me into the spiked part of their chain-link fence, and I would wind up with bruises all down my back, but that was far from the worst of my problems. Jill had anger issues, yeah, but it was Mary who really concerned both me and my parents. More than once I'd found things in their house that belonged to me, that had been locked in my shed or even in my house. A lot of things that were taken out of my own bedroom. Lucky for me, my mom was really careful about this kind of stuff, and always wrote our last name on things so you wouldn't really find it unless you were looking for it. I managed to get most of my stuff back. One time it was summer and I was about 9 when my mom was cleaning the tank we kept my hermit crabs in, so I had them outside in a small travel tank. Seeing me outside, Jill and Mary asked me if I wanted to come play. I'll admit I was kind of a show-off back then and felt this was a perfect opportunity to boast about my neat pets. Jill had plans to go have lunch with her grandmother, so Mary and I were left alone. She'd always given me bad vibes, but as a kid you tend not to pay very much attention to that sort of thing. That was when my mom called over the fence and saying that she had to run into work for about an hour or so and I had to go with her. Mary offered to look after my hermit crabs while I was gone, and I, being the stupid kid I was, agreed. When I got back, there was only 1 crab in the tank. The other, Mary claimed, had run away. In case you don't know, hermit crabs aren't exactly the fastest pet out there. It wasn't until about a year later that we were playing hide-and-seek, and I found the mutilated corpse of a hermit crab in their garage, along with remains of the latest cat they had buried. As the years went on, things only got worse. My cats were both outside cats, and one day we found one with a belt around her neck. I wanted to pretend it wasn't Mary, but there were only so many glittery purple belts in town, and Mary owned one of them. There aren't a lot of toads around in my area, and when you're a kid in the 90s, finding one was like the highlight of your week, especially like me, when you're into pets and animals and that sort of thing. Mary was an avid Britney Spears fan, and she was known for standing on her front porch and singing along to Toxic for hours on end. Once we had found a toad in my mom's garden. We had some tent stakes outside left over from a party that we had had, and Mary decided to help herself to one. What I saw still haunts my memory. She took the toad and stuck the tent stake down its throat while it was still alive, using it as a microphone. I started crying and begged her to stop, but she only sang louder as though to drown me out. Eventually she got bored and took the stake out, noticing the blood on the end. She said that this meant the toad was dying, so she proceeded to bury it alive. My dad came out, having heard my pleas. When he realized what was going on, he told her to stop, that she couldn't do that to an innocent animal, to which she replied, "I'll do whatever I want," and then stomped it dead. They moved out when I was in high school, and a new family lives in their house now. They're nice, a couple with 2 foster kids. The little boy just turned 5, and we sometimes pay him to come over and leave some food on the porch for the cats when we go away for a weekend. When they first moved in, my mom was quick to try and make friends. I've always had pretty bad anxiety issues, so I wasn't very pleased when she made me make friends, too. I happened to mention the last people who lived in the house, and noticed that my mom seemed to get a little uncomfortable at this. When we got back to our house, my mom sat me down. She said that since I was older, I was 16 at the time, it seemed like it wouldn't be a problem anymore, but she had something that she wanted to tell me. Turns out when I was really little, Mary had actually been one to bite, scratch, and hit. This didn't surprise me much. I remembered that a little bit, and lots of kids like to do that. But then she went on to ask if I remembered the incident with the shovel. I told her no, honestly wondering what the hell she was talking about. When I was about 5 and Mary was 3, she had found the spade of a broken metal shovel somewhere, probably in their garage. I'd been playing with Jill in their yard that day, and Mom was shocked when she heard me screaming in terror, especially because I was always a quiet kid. When she looked, she saw Mary chasing me around, trying to slam the shovel over my head. We didn't know it at the time, but I had a blood pressure condition which makes me get dehydrated extremely easily, and I was on the verge of losing consciousness by the time I finally screamed for help. She also told me that only a couple of months prior she'd run into their mother at the store, where she'd informed my mom that Mary had been sent to a home for mentally ill children, and that when she had lived at home she had kept a steak knife under her pillow in case Mary ever threatened her. I'm not sure why I don't remember the shovel incident, be it because of my young age or trauma, but I do have vague memories of it now, and that my mom told me, and I'm older, I'm less confused and more horrified as I think of all the pets that they had died seemingly out of nowhere. I can remember at least 2 hamsters, 4 fish, a dog, 6 cats, one of which had 7 kittens that still went missing. There were probably more, but I try not to think about it. I'm in college on the other side of the state now, but every so often I'll see a post on social media from Jill. She never mentions her sister, but according to their mother, Mary still asks about me sometimes when they go to visit her. Sometimes when I'm at home, I'm afraid I'll look out the window and see her face, despite my bedroom being on the 2nd floor. I flinch every time someone pretends to throw something or take a swing at me, and hearing even joyful, playful screams makes my heart race. I'm a neuroatypical psychology major, so I hate to paint mentally ill people in a negative light or make them out to be subhuman monsters meant to be feared. I know a lot of people who suffer with mental illness, and they are some of the kindest, gentlest, hardworking people I have ever met. But every so often, there's that one that breaks up the pattern and lives up to all the ableist stereotypes you can think of. That was Mary. My journey into the dark web. I would like to convey to you all my story of my accidental journey into the unknown space known as the dark web. I'm a computer technician by profession. I work for a company that is contracted by local businesses and private consumers to set up internet connections, install software, and repair any sort of computer problems they can come up with. So, naturally, I get all kinds of crazy stories and problems that these people can come up. I swear, some of them just don't know how to work a computer, even in this day and age. Anyway, one day I get a call from a local business complaining that their internet is acting up and that they must have a computer virus. So, thinking that someone must have unplugged a network cable or downloaded a Trojan horse accidentally, I get up and drive over to the business to address the problem. As soon as I arrive, the man who called me immediately spots me and starts going on and on about hackers and how much he hates Microsoft Windows, how many viruses it creates, and all that kind of nonsense that I usually receive when addressing business problems. He leads me to his computer, and I pull out my laptop and sit down in front of it and begin to work. He tells me, "Hey, good luck, buddy," and walks away. He went and did whatever he had to do in his downtime. I open up the browser he uses, Internet Explorer, no surprise. And of course, it opens to About Blank. It doesn't even have a home page set. So I try connecting to Google, 404 error. Alright, well, now I know that Google.com definitely exists, so there's a problem with his internet connection. I open his network and sharing center to see if I can use the built-in troubleshooter to diagnose his problems, but I give myself a well-deserved facepalm when I see that he isn't connected to any network at all. So I search for some networks. Find a few wireless connections for him to connect to. They're all WEP encrypted, and I'm also positive that he doesn't know the key, so I break out my laptop and run a web cracking tool to get his computer up and running again. As I'm waiting for my tool to find the web key, another network suddenly shows up on my computer. This one unprotected with an SSID consisting of a random hexadecimal string. Now, I'm extremely bored waiting for this guy to return, so I decide to connect to it and take a little run around to see where this is coming from. I connect without problems and open up my toolkit of cracking tools to see if I can find a source for this connection. As I'm having fun hacking away at this unprotected network, my computer freezes up, albeit only for a second. But this doesn't happen much, and it caught me by surprise. I shrugged it off as the poor internet speed here, and I just kept on going. A couple minutes later, however, it happens again. And a few minutes after that, another time. Each time, the pauses get longer and longer. Weird, I thought to myself. What the hell's with this network? It was then that things started getting really interesting. After the long string of pauses, my screen flickered a little bit, and out of nowhere, my browser opened by itself. Now I was worried that I had somehow infected my computer with some kind of malware by connecting to this network, and I proceeded to close the browser and began to disconnect from the network before anything else could happen. But I couldn't disconnect. No matter how many times I clicked the little disconnect button, my computer didn't respond, despite everything else on my screen running fine. Fuck, I thought to myself, this is going to be a long day. And just as I was about to hit the power button on my laptop to perform a hard reset, my browser opened again. This time with a little chat box.
Hello?
I stared at the screen for a couple of seconds, not knowing what was going on.
I want to talk to you.
Now, I had heard that these AI programs have all these program responses to stimulate conversation with people, and I was not impressed. This was one nasty virus.
You need to leave this network now. This is your last warning.
Huh. Maybe it was an automated security program designed to keep hackers out? I'll have to admit, I was impressed with it. I had never seen anything like this before.
I'm telling you, one last time, leave now.
I don't know what made me do it, but I responded to the program. Or what? The next response scared me more than anything in this world ever will. The program began listing information about me. My name, address, telephone number, credit card information, my parents' names, their address. My heart sank in my chest, and all the color immediately left my face. I couldn't move. I just sat there, paralyzed with fear. But what came next was even worse.
Don't look at me like that.
Oh, fuck. My webcam was on.
You really shouldn't stare, H3Man 4694. You might see something you'll regret.
Suddenly, the most horrifying images you could ever imagine flashed on my screen. Images of disemboweled humans, human sacrifice, detached limbs, cannibals eating people, video clips of mass suicides and firing lines. My heart was racing. My body was shaking in utter fear of the images I was being shown. They're seared in my brain. These were things that no one should ever see. I mustered the strength I had left and hit the power button on my computer and slammed it shut. I got up and ran to the nearest bathroom and threw up a couple of times. I was drenched in sweat, and I could barely compose myself. It took me about 20 minutes to go back to my computer, and even then I had a hard time getting near it. I looked over at my client's computer, and it was finally connected to the wireless network I was cracking earlier. It was working fine now. At that time, my client returned and thanked me for fixing his internet. I didn't say anything. I just grabbed my laptop and left. Going down the elevator with my laptop under my shoulder was a terrible feeling. I just wanted to leave this place and get my laptop replaced as soon as I could. 5th floor, 4th floor, come on, come on. 3rd floor, 2nd floor, come on, god damn it! Ping! Ground floor. The doors opened up. Come on, come on! And just as the doors opened, from behind me I heard a whisper, while there was no one there.
You really shouldn't stare.
Joanne's dog. When in junior high, I had a friend named Joanne who was a fantastic artist. During the summer months, we would spend a lot of time horseback riding. Joanne had a little fox terrier that followed us everywhere. Joanne absolutely adored that little dog. When school started, Joanne and I got into this art class together. And one day I glanced over to her easel to see what she was painting when I noticed her hand was shaking violently. I asked her, "Joanne, what's wrong?" She replied that she didn't know, but that she was feeling very apprehensive about something. She started shaking so badly that the art teacher came over and asked Joanne what was wrong. By now, Joanne was crying so hard that the teacher told me to take her to the nurse. Joanne couldn't explain it to the nurse either. After getting her to lie down, the nurse said she would call Joanne's mother to come and get her. She went into another room and placed the call. A few minutes later, she came to the door and signaled me to join her in her office. She told me Joanne's mother was on her way and that I should stay with Joanne until she arrived. The nurse added that when she explained to Joanne's mother what was happening, her mother said she understood. 20 minutes earlier, when the shaking first started, Joanne's little dog was hit by a car and was killed. The connection between people and their pets can be pretty awesome. The Dead Town. This is short but weird, and I swear it's the truth. In late August of 2001, my husband and I were moving from Georgia to Oregon. We had decided that we would drive cross-country and visit a few friends along the way. We hit Kansas late one night, and we stayed in a nice little motel and then headed out early the next morning. Around 1 in the afternoon, we were ready for lunch and a place to gas up the truck, so we started looking for a place to pull off the highway. A billboard came up saying, "Gas 8 miles ahead," so perfect, we took that exit. We took the off-ramp onto a dirt road for about 1.5 miles before we came to the town. On both sides of the road there were nothing but graves. It was like one big cemetery. We were kind of freaked out by that because we can see the buildings of the town up ahead and it's tiny. I mean, there are thousands of graves for a town that looks like maybe 200 people live. More disturbing, not one of the headstones looked old. We get to the town proper. Main Street is 2 blocks long with the usual buildings on either side of the street. A small bank, a general store, and so on. It dead ends at a huge white church. There's only one other street in the town that we can see, and it just kind of goes off into the distance west of where we were. We drove down the main street, looking for the gas station. There are some cars parked along it, and a few at the church, or maybe 20 in total. And towards the end of the first block, there's a diner, and the sign says open. Great, we need lunch. But there are no people. Let me be clearer. No one in the buildings, no one on the sidewalk, no one anywhere. We did not see one living thing. No people, no dogs, nothing. No one at the gas station, no one at the church or diner, no one outside, and it was dead quiet. Not a sound. This was at 1 p.m. or so, as I mentioned, on a Thursday afternoon. Where the hell was everyone? By the time we got to the end of the second block, my husband and I both were cold as ice. It was the strangest, creepiest feeling. Needless to say, we turned the truck around and headed back out. No stopping for lunch or anything. We just left as fast as we could. The Mist in the Cave. In my late teens, I was fascinated by the caves and the bluffs along the Mississippi River just outside of downtown St. Paul. We had parties in numerous caves as well as just exploring them. The stories I am about to relate are a combination of first-hand experience and reliable second party. They're all set roughly in the early 90s. Right around 1991, I was with a group of friends going into what we termed as the monastery, which is connected to the cave we called the dungeon, both of which are located immediately behind the Department of Agriculture on Plato Boulevard just off of Wabasha Street in St. Paul. Don't try to check it out. After a second round of deaths in the cave about 3 to 4 years ago, the police are watching this area closely, and they've even sealed the majority of the possible entrances off. I know there are a couple more still likely open, but I wouldn't even try it. Our spelunking trip was pretty uneventful for the most part. It was a cave I had been in countless times before, and I was kind of showing off before 4 friends, 3 of which had never been in any of the caves before. Back then I could easily draw a map of the whole thing, though memory has dimmed quite a bit since then. We entered through the monastery and crossed into the dungeon fairly quickly. The monastery is just a couple of rooms which people have decorated with crosses and stuff like that. Dungeon has a much darker reputation, which may have led to the decorations in monastery as having been used as one point for satanic rites by people that were playing with the Necronomicon. As we got to the very back 2 corridors, we ran into a wall of mist blocking progress forward. It stunk of burned creosote, which coated a lot of the timber that was stashed into these caves in an effort to fill them up. It wasn't a cloud of mist, it was more like a wall, floor to ceiling, wall to wall in the opening next to the corridor. This would have been more than 10 feet wide and maybe about 10 or 15 feet tall. It was a huge opening, but again, faded memory dims the actual dimensions. The ones I put forward are very conservative. At this point, I need to note that 4 of us were devout believers in the supernatural, while 1 was completely denying the possibility out of hand. We'll call my partners Jeremy, Ron, Lisa, and Adam. Adam was the skeptic. It might also be important to know that it was known that there had been at least 1 suicide in this cave, and that the room we were standing in looking at this mist wall was rumored to have where it happened. Suddenly, Adam turned to the rest of us and told us that he had a very bad feeling. There was something back behind the mist that was watching us. By this point, he was only voicing the feelings that the rest of us were already beginning to feel. Needless to say, at this point, we were a long way from the safety of the only exits that I was the only one who knew how to find. There was at least 1 closer, which I will get to in a moment, but I only knew of 2 of them, and they were both back at the beginning on the other side of the monastery. The way back included climbing into overhead shafts and crawling through a 5-foot-long crawl space. All 5 of us raced back to the opening, including diving into the crawl space and sliding most of the way through it. Our unbeliever was no longer upon that on our exit. He was now a full-fledged believer. The exit we used was a fairly steep mound heading up and out, and it being winter, it was fairly slick. Upon returning to the open air, though, we all heard a weird sort of rumbling roar from inside, and we all vowed never to go back in there. Lisa later told the rest of us that she had actually heard a voice talking to her, but could not make out exactly what it had said. She said that she had heard the voice early on, not long after we crossed into dungeon from monastery. Fast forward 1 week, and another friend of mine, we'll call him Rick, who had previously gone in the caves, had also heard my story, went in to investigate for himself. He knew how to find the opening that was a lot closer to the mysterious mist wall. When he went in, though, there was no mist. The mist had filled around half of the cave as a low-lying fog, and as you got closer to where the wall was, the fog got deeper. He knew this because I had drawn him a map. He went in with another friend and told me that about the time he got to where the wall was, the fog was almost waist deep. I'm 5'9", and Rick was taller than me, and I'd say roughly 5'11". Being an old hat at this, he never went into a cave without fresh batteries in his flashlight. Although as soon as he got to the wall room, his flashlight just went out. No warning, no hesitation, just gone. I should note that he used alkaline batteries because he found that they tended to die in flashlights by getting gradually dimmer, while rechargeables would wink out rather quickly. Luckily, his friend still had a working flashlight. They started moving out of there when Rick suddenly became very dizzy. He slumped against the wall, and his friend had to support him and help get him out. They got back to the entrance, and his friend was unable to lift him out, so he kind of propped him facing out the entrance while Rick regained his composure. About this time, Rick was realizing that he could not use or move his right arm. After sitting a while, he was able to pull himself out without his friend's help. They went to the hospital immediately, and Rick was given a clean bill of health. Nothing appeared to be out of the ordinary, yet he could still not feel, use, or move his right arm. It was dead from the shoulder down. There was never any explanation for this, and he learned to cope with it until about 6 months later, he started to regain feeling in his arm and shortly after started regaining limited movement. After about 8 months, his arm was just the same as it had been previously. I thought this would have been the end, but in remembering my caving days with my wife back when we had just started dating, She told me that she had gone into the caves with 4 male friends, roughly 1 to 2 years prior to my experience. She had stated that the caves had never been their destination, but that for some reason she felt compelled to go there. She said that shortly after entering, she did hear a voice that said,
"One of you is different and will not make it out."
In this case, she was not the only one to hear this warning. One other person had heard it, and they decided to not proceed. Fast forward to about 2002 or 2003. A small group of teens went into the caves, 4 guys and 1 girl. Only 1 came out. That team was able to get to the holiday station not far away and summoned police and fire crews who went in to retrieve the bodies of 4 companions who were allegedly overcome by carbon monoxide shortly after entering the caves. I remain convinced that there is something sinister in that cave until the day that I die, and it's rather funny that a lot of groups that are drawn to that cave are the same. 4 male, 1 female. The exception was my friend Rick and his male friend. After this set of deaths, the city went crazy with filling entrances and patrolling the area. You now can't get near any of the entrances without being spotted. There is only one entrance that I can think of that may still be open. They did not explore the caves to find the exits, therefore there is a way to get in way up the bluff that wasn't found because there is no easy way to get into it. I do not recommend anyone trying to find this way in, though. Hauntings aside, it's just plain dangerous. Whatever is in there is sinister and it's ancient. I do not believe it to be merely the ghost of someone who passed in there either. It just doesn't feel human. The Dead Town. This is short but weird, and I swear it's the truth. In late August of 2001, my husband and I were moving from Georgia to Oregon. We had decided that we would drive cross-country and visit a few friends along the way. We hit Kansas late one night, and we stayed in a nice little motel and then headed out early the next morning. Around 1 in the afternoon, we were ready for lunch and a place to gas up the truck, so we started looking for a place to pull off the highway. A billboard came up saying, "Gas, 8 miles ahead," so perfect, we took that exit. We took the off-ramp onto a dirt road for about 1.5 miles before we came to the town. On both sides of the road there were nothing but graves. It was like one big cemetery. We were kind of freaked out by that because we can see the buildings of the town up ahead, and it's tiny. I mean, there are thousands of graves for a town that looks like maybe 200 people live. More disturbing, not one of the headstones looked old. We get to the town proper. Main Street is 2 blocks long with the usual buildings on either side of the street. A small bank, a general store, and so on. It dead ends at a huge white church. There's only one other street in the town that we can see, and it just kind of goes off into the distance west of where we were. We drove down the main street, looking for the gas station. There's some cars parked along it, and a few at the church, or maybe 20 in total. And towards the end of the first block, there's a diner, and the sign says open. Great, we need lunch. But there are no people. Let me be clearer. No one in the buildings, no one on the sidewalk, no one anywhere. We did not see one living thing. No people, no dogs, nothing. No one at the gas station, no one at the church or diner, no one outside, and it was dead quiet, not a sound. This was at 1 p.m. or so, as I mentioned, on a Thursday afternoon. Where the hell was everyone? By the time we got to the end of the second block, my husband and I both were cold as ice. It was the strangest, creepiest feeling. And needless to say, we turned the truck around and headed back out. No stopping for lunch or anything. We just left as fast as we could. Don't try to break into my house again. I'm by no means a big guy. At 19, I'm 5'7" and 185 pounds. I was 16 at the time of the story, and it was about the same size. I live in a pretty nice neighborhood where no crime except for the occasional domestic disturbance call happens. My house is a split-level home and is down a pretty steep hill, and from out the front window you can see the top of our driveway and a little bit of the road in front of our house. My parents had gone away for the week and left me home alone with my 2 dogs, a Great Pyrenees and a German Shepherd. Soon after they left, my grandparents came over for the day so that we could go out to eat later. I was sitting in my living room with my grandpa watching TV and carrying on about cars and whatnot when he and I both noticed a newer model white Ford F-150 that kept driving by my house and stopping at the top of our driveway. We thought nothing of it at first because people stop at the top of our driveway a lot for some reason. After the third or fourth time they did this, my grandpa and I just kept an eye on it. The truck kept passing by like this for more than an hour, and then it left. This was the last I saw of the truck, or so I thought. I continued on with my day as normal, and my grandparents left about 7 p.m. that night. A few hours passed and it had just gotten dark. It was summer at the time, so it usually gets darker later. I was watching TV in the living room with the lights off, and the blinds open just enough to see a little bit of my front yard. I noticed out of the corner of my eye light coming from someone's headlights, but it was from a distance, and it was coming through the opening in the blinds. You can see cars coming over a small hill in my neighborhood from the front windows. I didn't think anything of it, since it was a Friday night and people come home late a lot in my neighborhood. I paid no mind, and that is until I saw them pointing towards my house. Normally I would just let this go, because as I said earlier, people stop and turn around in our driveway a lot. But something told me to get up and look. I opened one of the blinds to see who was out there. My blood ran cold when I saw who it was. It was the same Ford F-150 that had been creeping around my house earlier. I ran and grabbed my Smith & Wesson .357 Magnum revolver from my gun safe and turned on the front porch light and ran outside. As I got outside, 4 rather large men got out of the truck and stopped and just stared at me. Like I said earlier, I'm not a very big guy, but that didn't matter at the time. I pulled the hammer back on the revolver, and in the most intimidating voice I could come up with as a 16-year-old, I yelled, "Who the fuck are you?" One guy grabbed what looked like a pipe or a tire iron or something out of the truck, and they all started running toward me. I pointed the gun toward them and fired. If you've ever shot a .357 Magnum, you know that's a pretty loud bang. I hit the truck, hitting the windshield, and shattered it. I heard one of the guys yell out, "Oh shit, he's got a gun! Run!" They all ran back to their truck and hauled ass out of there. I called the police and my parents and told them what happened. I didn't tell my parents I shot at them until much later. The police showed up within 5 minutes and took a report from me. I didn't tell the officer that I had hit their truck, but that I just fired a warning shot to scare them off. He told me they would keep an eye out for the truck. I gave a detailed description of that truck since I had seen it a lot earlier in the day. I had my grandpa come over and stay the night with me that night. I don't know if they ever caught the guys or even found out who they were. But, hey, to the assholes whose truck I shot, don't come back. It's for your own good. The demon in my house. When I was 12 years old, my family moved to Winnemucca, Nevada, so my mom can work at one of the gold mines there. We moved into a house right next to the courthouse on Malarkey Street, and we lived there for close on to a year. The whole house had an eerie feeling to it, but we just passed things off as, the house is just really old. Amid the sounds of traffic and the neighbors fighting next door, the house was normally quiet, as if no one was there at all. However, some rooms, despite the many windows, were always dark. My sister's room was the darkest of all, and even in the middle of the day, her room had this presence of an early evening darkness. I began to notice at nighttime the sound of footsteps going through the house, starting at the front door and walking all the way to the back door. Oftentimes, this happened when I was home alone. And one time when I heard the sounds, I remember vividly several times being tripped by something, yet no one was there. Our basement was a whole other story. This is where our laundry was done. At nighttime, no one would enter the basement alone. I would go maybe 5 or 6 steps down the stairs and suddenly become paralyzed with fear. I didn't know if I should turn and run or just stand there and face what I feared would be a pack of demons. I say demons because one such instance I went to change the laundry over. I heard a scratching sound coming from one of the corners. I turned to look, thinking it was a mouse, and I saw the front half of a dark figure crawling across the floor. I did turn and run upstairs, screaming. A few months later, I began to notice the paint on the walls was fading and a faint reddish color would appear underneath the white paint. I couldn't make out the words, but there were words and some symbols also scratched there. Upstairs, the television would turn on and off on its own. When it would turn on its own, it would always be tuned to a station that had nothing but static, and the volume would be all the way up. This was odd because we had cable, and there were no staticky channels. The worst was what the house did to my family. My mom became mean and cruel. She was always angry and becoming increasingly violent. Out of nowhere, I would have these dreams that I was going to kill my sister and brother. When we finally moved out, all of that was gone, and it was like it never really happened. As bizarre as the story is, these encounters are true, and they're still burned in my memory. I truly believe it takes a brave soul to enter that house, and I hope that whoever is living there is not experiencing the same things that we did. Hello, Uncle Josh here. Thanks for listening, and I hope you enjoyed these true scary stories from around the world. If you are interested in having your story shared on the air, please email unclejoshscarystories@gmail.com. In the subject line, please let me know the nature of your story. Also, remember to omit any real person's name that is involved in your story, and also send a short note of consent letting me know that I have your permission to share your story. Thanks again for listening. Stay tuned for more of Uncle Josh's true scary stories.